So today we're going to talk about mailers. So does anybody know like what mailers do? Has anyone done mailers before? Anyone else? Cool. All right. Well, I mean, mailers just send emails. That's like the whole point. So what you get out of mailers, like pull up this Rails guide. You guys have these slides, right? Like the short link is BEWD mailers, and then like just pull these guys. So like today, like we have like a website, but it doesn't like get outside. It doesn't like what I call like getting outside of the internet. Like it doesn't like get outside of your browser and do anything. And mailers are your first step to be able to do it. This is basically just like sending people emails. So like you get emails all the time. A lot of times they're spammy. Those are like marketing emails. Usually in the app you're doing what's called transactional emails. It's important to kind of realize what kinds of emails are transactional versus marketing because there are different laws that regard them. Some of these laws are like serious and some of them are not so serious. But like basically like can't spam act that really only applies to marketing emails. Transactional emails are kind of they're kind of free from that actually. So if you like somebody like signs up or buys something or does like an interaction on your website, like that is a transactional email and like that's totally cool to send from your web app without like the unsubscribe link and stuff like that. So which is totally good. So mailers kind of show you how to give you a way inside of your Rails app to be able to create emails. Just like a lot of stuff in Rails, particularly like the basic stuff, you're able to just go ahead and generate them right from the command line using a Rails generator. So Rails G mailer, and then the way I think about mailers is I think about them a lot like controllers. So you've got the controller, and then you've got actions. So this welcome here, this would be like the action that you want to fire on the user mailer, and then later on you might create other actions. Like for example, user mailer could have like what else do users like kind of do? They forget their password. Every user forgets their password at least 5 times a day. So yeah, that would be like the next one I probably would implement. Would be like forget password, and then like maybe like cancel account, or like other kind of transactional stuff. So what you'd end up with is you'd end up with a class like user mailer. You'd have a whole bunch of like actions, which are a lot like the actions on your controllers, and they'll just do stuff. So unlike Rails controllers, which have like a default set of RESTful actions, which are like, give me an example of RESTful action. We're doing this like Socratic thing where I ask you questions. RESTful action on a controller. Anybody else? What about like update, right? Like that's an action, right? Like create. Yeah, CRUD related. Well, what's the other way? Like all right, create and update. Those are like the 2 of them. There's like 3 more. Index, destroy. Like those are like the default RESTful actions. But on your mailers, they'll be like whatever you come up with. Like, you can just make them up. So welcome is just like that's not like a standard one or anything. You just make them up. That kind of makes sense. So like in your controllers, they're like a set of default actions, but that's not the case for mailers. So you just make them up. And then yeah, you've got inside the console, you've got this kind of interesting syntax where you say like you call a static method on this class, and then that like creates the mailer, and then you call deliver on that, and that actually sends the message. So it's a little bit of a strange calling syntax. I don't know if you guys have recognized that right away, but once you learn a little bit about Ruby, you'll be like, what the fuck? Why do they call it like that? Why is it called like that? But there's like a special module that's fixed and lets you do it. So this is this isn't an instance. This is actually the class itself, and then you call a method on this class, and then you call another method. This is called method chaining on the result of this, and that will actually send the message. So if you just call usermail.welcome, what you'll get back is you'll get a mail message that's all ready to go, but until you call deliver on it, it's not actually going to be sent. That make sense? Okay.
So is that like what the action is? Like if you do some action on the website, then it'll all deliver?
Yeah, what I would do, so probably what happens, like, for example, if you did this inside of a controller, like let's just go ahead and like go to let's just go to like a controller action. All right, so here's just like something controller, application controller. All right, and this is gonna be Ruby. Alright, cool. So, like, if this was my, like, instead of my something controller, let's make this like a user's controller. Because that's kind of what we're talking about here. Alright, so, like, you'd have a def create. And this would probably get called from your form, and here you do something like user create, and you pass in like user params, and this will give you user. And then what you're going to want to do later is you take a user mailer, welcome user dot deliver, and then you probably redirect root / welcome. So of this stuff, some of this should be like you should already know this. So like user create here, that's just kind of like imagining that I had a user model, which should be backed by like a user table. Then this would go ahead and create them from this undefined like user params, which we'd go ahead and define ourselves. Private user params. User permit. All right, so like, you know, I'll create a user from my user params. We could do like a create bang, that'd be fine. And then if the user will get created, and then you'll go ahead and you like welcome the user to your site. And you pass in, into that welcome method, you pass in the user itself, and that will be what you use. It's kind of like that's what the mailer is going to use to figure out how to like build the email correctly. So for example, properties that you might want to have off of a user would be like their email, their name, like their birthday, whatever stuff you collect in a user form. Does that make sense? Questions about that? So this is the calling syntax that we usually use. So while you could actually call it without any parameters, that's not going to be a very effective message because you're not going to know who to send it to, or really, it won't be personalized in any way. And like usually, like email need to be personalized at least with the recipient. So you almost always call it with something, and that way, when it gets delivered, you'll have a it'll get customized to the person who sends it. So that's how you do it there. So the other thing that you're going to want to do, this is totally just like a practical matter, is that emails tend to be sent over like an email server. So you could send them like so you can send them yourself. You could just create your own, you can set up your own email server. You could install it if you're on OS X. But probably you're not going to do that because it turns out like email has all this verification built into it. One's called SPF and one's called DCIM, and those are both signing mechanisms for email. And if you spring your own email server, your email won't get delivered. Just turns out. So you use in general, you use like a service, and we'll talk about one next. But when you're in development, you don't have a server to connect to, and so this thing called Mailcatcher is just like great, a totally awesome call. So if you just like gem install this, this is a little bit different than when we put things in our bundle. So you could put this in your bundle under the test group or the development group. That way other friends of yours would also install it, but the version isn't really that important. What this does is it runs like a dummy mail server, and your Rails app will connect to this dummy mail server and send messages, because like when you call deliver here, what that's going to do is that's going to put into motion a couple of different events in Ruby. It's going to say, go find the mail server and then push this message over to them. So it's essentially like an API call. It's not an HTTP API call in general because mail has its own protocol, the SMTP protocol. So that's Mailcatcher. So we definitely want to get that. That's going to be awesome. And then like this little thing that says down here, Mailcatcher runs on a particular set of ports. On SMTP, it runs on a standard SMTP port, 1025. If you've got Mailcatcher running already, then you'll get this like complaining about the port because only one thing can connect on the port. So, then there are some good tricks in here about how to configure inside your Rails app so that you can get Mailcatcher to work. This is definitely a good call. So your Rails app has, like a lot of things in Rails, this delivery method, this is kind of a really special method. You can, or this is a special configuration thing. So if you send in the SMTP symbol, then you'll have to like specify some certain things, like where do you want to connect to and on which port. You can send in all kinds of other things in delivery method. Like if you put in, I think it's Amazon SES. Amazon provides all kinds of web services that your app could use. SES is one of them. It's a simple email service. It's a very, very scalable email platform. And if you just send in the symbol AWS SES, then Rails will kind of figure out how to send on SES pretty much on its own. It's the same with a couple other email services. They're all kind of baked into Rails, which is pretty cool. But SMTP is a totally good way to go. and it's the way that we'll run locally. So this is for the local development environment. Then when you visit the visit Mailcatcher in your browser, you'll see this, which is like this cool like Mailcatcher thing. Remember, you're able to get that because when you run the Mailcatcher binary, it actually starts up two different processes. It starts up a SMTP server, which is running, and it's also there's a separate HTTP server, which I think itself is implemented as a Sniper app. So that will run on a certain port, and then that'll let you kind of view the email. So when you send an email in your Rails app, it'll get pushed into the Mailcatcher, the fake SMTP server, and then you'll be able to view it through the Sinatra app that lets you see all the messages in there. And that's why it's like a catcher. Like it catches every message. So it's pretty cool. And then there's an alternative way to review mail, and that was introduced in Rails 4.1 as this thing called mailer previews. They are pretty cool. I personally prefer Mailcatcher, but mailer previews are still a really good feature that's supported in Rails, so we might as well cover them. They are at the kind of like special sort of reserved / Rails path. It's kind of a path that there's really no reason for you to need, so it's kind of set up by Rails. Some other frameworks use an underscore, but yeah, we use regular Rails, so there'll be a lot of things eventually under the Rails path. The / mailer is the first one that was mounted there, and that was started in Rails 4.1. Yeah, go ahead.
Now it's a good one. Capture I can take some error for
Looks like it's getting the same thing.
Okay, cool. Well, you know what we can do? This is like we're kind of halfway through these slides. Next thing we're gonna do is like some other little pieces. So let's try to like do like slides 1 through 7. You know, just kind of like get action mailer configured, get Mailcatcher, like, and then if you can, let's see here. Yeah, let's just try that out. So I'll kind of like walk around for a second. If you're good to go, then check out how to add these mailer previews on slide 7. So, Rafi, I'll check with you. So what do you got? Here says Mailcatcher. It says, oh my gosh, you can require such a library. Oh, interesting. So you just installed Mailcatcher and it was just like no dice. I can do that for you. Let's see what happens when I do that.
Getting past that first, you're getting the same time. It looks like past this time.
So, does anybody get the run out of curiosity? You getting the same error? You're getting what?
I think it's the same.
Same thing? Everybody's just getting the same thing? It's all jacked up? Did you guys, what are we on? We're on like Ruby 2.1? 2.1.2? Okay.
It's, I pulled it up here on GitHub.
Cool.
List of install jobs. Any ideas?
You've got a, I can take a look. Yeah, it's a quick peek. This is like not a completely fun, usual thing. For some reason, we've got a conflict in our gem set. There are plenty of other ways to do this, so no big deal. Let's see. You guys have got, so it says, these international conditions are always kind of jacked up. Let me see if I can, so you've got successful installs, and it just, yeah, when you run it, it's just like no chance. Yeah, Rails 2 is super old though, right? Because we're on Rails 4. Rails 2 is kind of like pretty ancient here. Mailcatcher. Let's see if of course, this will probably work on my computer. Yep, of course. So it's just you guys.
It's broken for a lot of people.
Yeah, no, I know, I'm just making a joke. But yeah, so what we'll do instead, we actually used to use Mailcatcher. Now we use this thing called Mailtrap. So we'll just use that instead. This is kind of even better in a lot of ways. So try out mailtrap.io. The only minus of this is you have to sign up for something, but luckily it's free. So at least for the size that we are. And it looks like you can even sign up with your Google account, which makes it really easy. So go ahead and go to that, and that way we'll get around the issue of like having Mailcatcher be kind of broken. And the reason that this is actually a really good thing is that Mailtrap, it kind of like is Mailcatcher as a service. So it's like an interface that you can connect to, and you'll be able to like see all your messages, and you'll be able to see them in like different like previews and stuff. So on integration, where it says Ruby on Rails here, this is pretty much exactly what we're going to copy into your development environment. So it's a little small on my screen, and it will stay small. But this says config environments star.ruby. That star here we should really just use development because we'll have different settings for our production stuff. So everybody give that a shot and see if we can get this stuff copied over. So this is a great example. Whenever I'm kind of like using one of these services, I was just trying to think about like what how does this work? This is really cool. Like, this is like somebody's startup. Like this isn't around for that long. Mailtrap. I feel like I first saw this in the last year or so. But it's like a totally slick service. You know, like the kinds of things like this is definitely a Rails app. Like I would go ahead and bet my life on it. So how can we tell something's a Rails app? Some clues. This is just kind of like a fill in the blank here. You go to view page source and you see this /assets. It's almost definitely a Rails app. This is /assets, and then it's got these hashes. So what's happening with those hashes? You guys should know this from from 2 classes ago when you guys talked about asset pipeline. So the question here was like, I went to this website and my conjecture was, I'm pretty sure this is a Rails app. And what I said was, when you go to view page source, you can almost tell right away if it's a Rails app because you'll see the /assets in all of the things that are linked in, and then you'll see these big long like sets of numbers and letters at the end of the assets. What are those numbers and letters? Just as kind of a review. Right, it's a hash of the contents. That's what the asset pipeline does, right? Is it generates those hash of contents. So like that's like a pretty easy giveaway. All right, cool. So everybody kind of like get signed up for Mailtrap and like figure that out. Confirmation email, no dice. Okay, cool. Well, so now what you want to do, right, is so let me go back to log in. So a lot of these services, like, and this is something that you'll do all the time as a developer, is that you'll go and you'll want to try out or use a service, and they usually make it pretty easy for you to do that. Usually with something that's like a copy and paste. So this is a really good example of like I would say 95% of the services you'll run into, there'll be like essentially some free tag somewhere and a little quick start explanation. So this is saying if you just drop this into your configure environments, in that particular one, the star here means just any of them, but again I would use your development one. Just paste that in there, then you'll get access to Mailtrap. And so what this is setting is it's setting the SMTP. It's setting the delivery method to SMTP, which is the same as if we were going to use Mailcatcher. It's going to set the port and the domain. So rather than setting a domain in the Mailcatcher slide, it was to localhost. There's a difference here. So this was localhost, and the port was 1025. Instead, in this particular Mailtrap instance, and yours may vary, in this particular Mailtrap instance, they want you to send on port 2525. And then this other stuff kind of authenticates me against the service, and that way, when I go to mailtrap.com, signed in as me, I can see my messages, versus when you go to mailtrap.com, you will see yours. Does everybody kind of know where to put that stuff in their Rails app? Anyone have any questions about that? You guys got it?
It's confirmation.
It's nothing. Just maybe why don't you like copy the, you like inspect the element, copy the link, see if you can maybe get that going.
It's a side to show you this like
That's like your, I feel like that's like an inbox book. I don't know. I mean, I don't actually have inbox. I'm stuck with regular old Gmail, but I'd check that out. All right. There you go. Submit that to Google. Cool. So that's what we're going to use. So instead of Mailcatcher, we're going to use Mailtrap. Then the next thing that we're going to kind of do here is talk about these Rails mailer previews. In order to do that, we need to actually create mailers. This slide here, slide 8, this is talking about a couple things that are kind of important in the context of emails. Different than the rest of your Rails apps, when you navigate around inside of your Rails apps, you usually use like a link to or a button to, and then you use resource underscore path. So like, give me an example of like a path that you guys have somewhere in the source code for your app.
Half of the source code around.
Yeah, exactly. Like, what's a model that's in your app, and like, when do you guys like navigate around?
We talking about, I'm talking about controllers.
Sure. Like, okay, so like, suppose you're like on your like index page where you have all your products. Like, what's the name of that? How would you navigate to that if you wanted to like use slash products, right? And then inside the Rails app, you don't typically like type out like slash products. You usually use like something underscore path, right? So it'd be like, right, exactly. Admin, yeah, it'd be like admin products path would probably be right. So like usually we use underscore path, and if you wanted to go to if you wanted to edit a particular product, that path would be, you got it. Yeah, edit admin products path. Yeah, exactly. So the underscore path, that means that it's a relative path. So it starts with a slash generally, and then it kind of goes on. So in edit admin products path, it would be slash admin slash product ID slash edit. That would be the relative path. But in an email, if you include a relative path, if you include a path like that, that path will not be qualified against your website. So when you click the link, it won't go anywhere. It will go to somewhere on Gmail because relative paths only work on the website that originated them. So when we're sending emails, instead, we need to use the underscore URL prefix. So it's a little bit different. Underscore URL will make it fully qualified. But in order to fully qualify it, we need to fully qualify it against something. And so Action Mailer includes this idea of what should the default URL options be, which is the host be and what should the port be. And that's what we're trying to do there, is set these default host and port. And so you want to make sure that you do that again in your config environments development, and that will make it so that when you create your email and you put these underscore URL paths, well, your URLs. When you put the URLs in there, that they'll actually go back to your website, because like when a fundamental part of email is you probably want to do is click back into your website so that you can get people to confirm their email or sign up or whatever, and that's how you do that.
Just want to keep in mind that since we're not using Action Mailer, we're just going with the thing on the website.
Well, we have Action Mailer. Action Mailer, right, is Action Mailer is one of the things you get with Rails. So like you get active support, Action Mailer, active record, and Rail ties and shit like that. So Action Mailer is that's like the thing, and then you can configure it how you want. So and then we've got like this. The next thing that you're going to want to do. So remember when I was showing you before, we talked about how these mailers they have actions. So in this case, just like the little quick example that I showed you in Sublime. Like you're going to call the welcome method, and you're going to pass in a user that you want to welcome. You're just going to this is just a function. So you're just going to say, okay, you're going to set up this user here. You set it to an instance variable, and then you'll get a rendering context just as if you were rendering a view. And so rather than ending the rendering context with respond with or with respond to with a format HTML or format JSON, you're going to do this mail to. And that will essentially tell the message to set up a message, or tell the mailer to set up a message. So this is going to be like the body of the way that your action should look inside of the mailer. Okay. And then the last thing that we're going to kind of do is we'll go through and we'll create these mailer preview, which is an alternative way to go ahead and review messages. So like mailer previews are another class that are actually inside of your Rails app, and they're just for like looking at messages. And it's an alternative to like something like Mailtrap or Mailcatcher, and it's just all inside of Rails. The biggest minus of that is that you're viewing it in your browser, and so your browser is not the same as most email clients. And this is something that is very confusing, I think, to a lot of people. When you send a perfectly good web page to your browser, it will load the CSS and it will like apply all kinds of reasonable like HTML5 stuff. But email clients, as anyone in marketing knows, they just go and munge it all up and kind of ruin it for you. So Rails mailers are not generally a good way to kind of preview the result of your email inside of a email client. That's why like something like that Mailtrap is really good because it'll actually kind of like view it as if it was Gmail or Outlook or one of those like terrible mail clients or Inbox, for example. This slide here talks a little bit about deployment because we've talked about Mailtrap and how we're going to use that to test our emails. But what we're going to do eventually is we're going to want this to go live. And when you do go live, you're going to need to connect to some kind of mail server. So the one that I think is a really good choice that's supported natively by Heroku is this thing called Mailgun. There are many to choose from. Like I mentioned, Amazon would be one of them, or there's Postmark. There's literally dozens. You can find a lot of these on the Heroku add-ons page. Maybe it's got a dash up. So if I go into here and I go to email and SMS, there's just, like I said, several of them. Mailgun is the one that we're going to use because it's a good one, known to be true. Okay. And then just like in our example, just like in the Mailtrap suggestion, we're going to set these same settings. In the case of a Heroku add-on, when we run the add-on to add Mailgun, it will actually set these environment variables for us inside of the Heroku app. Have you guys used environment variables for anything inside of Heroku before? No? Okay. Is anyone familiar with environment variables? Like what are environment variables? Yeah, go ahead, Jim. What do you got? Go for it, yeah. Yeah, you're totally right. So basically, the environment is a place that you can store configuration. So if you go to the terminal, and you say env in here, you can actually look at everything that's in your environment right now. So just try that out since we're just kind of shooting the shit here. So in my environment, there's a whole bunch of stuff. Some of which are more interesting than others. This one editor is kind of cool. That sets the default editor for Git. So, and then this one, shell, this one sets the shell that I use. So, what you're learning about the environment is all about configuration. So in the case of the environment that's on my computer by default, it's really all about how I do my own productivity. So like, what editor do I like? What shell do I like? Who am I signed in as? What user? So that exposes that information back to programs that are running on my computer, so it can figure out, if a program wants to display the user logged in and what shell they are, then you can use the environment to get to that. You can also, in your production environment, in your production Rails app, you can also use the environment to communicate information to your Rails app. So in a Heroku app, we just store anything that's like a username or a password in the environment because your app will be able to get to it, but you won't have to check into source code. Because once you put things into source code, like it can get moved around, it can set places, the environment is a secure place for that as opposed to putting it into source code. So that's a Heroku best practice. And you can use the environment to do really cool things, like you can switch things on and off. So for example, if you had a flag like, send real emails, you could save that in the environment, either true or false, and then if it's false, you could act on it in your application. In the case of these environment settings here, we're going to store the port, the address, the login, and the password, all of these things in the environment, and Heroku is actually going to do that for us automatically. That's kind of the way the Heroku platform works. Is when you do this add-on add Mailgun, it will go ahead and it will create logins and passwords and all this stuff for you for Mailgun, inject them into your environment. And you can look at the environment in your Heroku app by just running. You go to the right directory and you go to Heroku config. So it'll just be, it'll look just like. Just be Heroku config. Just like that. And then hit enter. So if you guys are all signed up for Heroku and set up your apps, try that out now and see if there's anything in the environment. There should be at least a couple things. Ian, what's in the environment? What do you got? Cool. What are the keys? What are the names of them?
Snag API, database URL, SQL, Rails.
Cool. Cool. So, does anyone recognize any of those and have any idea what any of them mean? Secret key base. What's that? You guys go over that in security last week. Secret key base, how cookies get signed, and stuff like that. Right. It's a big long hash. And what that is that's the signing token by which you sign all of your cookies, and that way your cookies are tamper-proof stored. That if you try to modify the value of that cookie, the encryption algorithm, that secret that's a secret for your app. And the way that the signing algorithm works is that unless you have that secret, you won't be able to get the cookie value to match. So that's the secret key base. That should get loaded from your environment in config secret key or something like that. It should be right in your Rails app. The other one that you see in there is your database URL. Your database URL gives you the whole string to connect to your Postgres database. So that's got at the front of it, they're kind of munging the protocol. So in the front of the protocol, it should say like Postgres and then : //. And then you'll see you're using it's essentially using an HTTP basic type scheme. So you're seeing the username and then a colon and then the password and then @sign. So that's kind of really old school HTTP basic authentication. But it turns out the URL itself is a great way to store stuff like username and password. So even though you couldn't necessarily visit that URL in your browser, it does kind of give you all the information. And then you'll see the host, and then you'll see the port, and then you'll see a / and then the actual database. So it turns out URL is a great way to store all the pieces of configuration. And that's actually how Heroku knows, how your Rails app on Heroku knows which database to connect to is using that database URL. Is there another interesting piece in there? There's Bugsnag API, right? Because you guys all added Bugsnag. So that Bugsnag API key, that's also stored in the environment because it's unique to every one of you. And you don't necessarily need to check it into your source because it could change. It might be a secret. Usually you don't store that stuff in source. And just like we'll do with the Mailgun stuff, setting it in the environment is great because you kind of set there once and it's always around there. And Heroku keeps track of the environment for you so that in the future you'll always have the environment just what you want. If you wanted to add something new to your environment, it's very, very easy. So you could put your own things there. They don't have to be like some sort of special Heroku thing. It's just as easy as Heroku config. You can see the things that I've already set here. So actually, this is something in my history. So here, I wanted to set an environment variable called mail delivery method. And like I said, there's this thing you can change it to Amazon SES. So at some point in the history on this computer, I set this on some Heroku app. But here you could set whatever environment variable you want. So you could just set, send emails or reels to false. And then if you hit enter, that'll go ahead and set that variable. And then if later on you change it and set it to true, then you can act on that inside your app. So it'll be your responsibility to actually do something with this value of the environment variable, but that's how the environment works. So then, kind of back to these slides here. So this last slide kind of sets you up, shows you how to set up your stuff. So hopefully by the end of the class, we'll get everybody ready to go on Heroku and be able to send emails there. And then this is kind of like a basic test that you can run inside of Heroku is to send an email to your first user. So these are the assignments. So we'll kind of work on them just like how we always do. I'll kind of go around and help everybody out. There is a piece of extra credit for today, which I'll just go ahead and introduce one more time. You guys already have your you already have the back end interface for your products. And so if you right now, I think what you guys are using is you're using image URLs to be your product images, but you can't actually set your own product images. So if you took a picture with your phone and you wanted to get that into your store, you wouldn't be able to do that because that's not on the internet right now. So ThoughtPot has a gem called Paperclip, which is a great way to associate images or associate any attachment, any data, but generally speaking, it's an image, to an active record model. So in the case of a product, I would suggest that you associate the product image because that will make your website way better for later on when you want to have a professional photographer take pictures or something like that. So that's extra credit. It's seemingly unrelated to emails, but what could happen is that you could take all your products and you could send an email newsletter with all your products, something like that. So there is kind of a little bit of a tie over there, but I just thought this was a cool gem to work with. And it's another case. So, but definitely get this. Try out this assignment first, and I'll kind of be around. Before we do that, do we have any kind of like big questions? No? Okay, cool. So the basic idea would be create the mailer, get it working locally against Mailtrap, and be able to demonstrate that that actually works, and then we'll send it to Room. That would be like the very basic thing.